Okay, welcome back to All Prophecies According to Christ, and our channel is Rev9 Video on YouTube. Website is angloisrael.com. We left off at Micah 6:15, so we're here in John. Okay, just got done in Micah. That's the woman in the well, and I said that was Babylon the Great being judged, end time, Jews for Christ being redeemed, and I said we would go look at Micah 6:15 to see what the context is. So, probably read that, okay. I've inflicted disease, yes, so I said that was on the house of God. Well, I said, okay, but if you just back up into Micah, so how do we know? Micah's all about this Jews against Christ being judged at the end time. Well, if you go back to the beginning, it starts out talking about house of Israel, house of Judah. The Lord starts from his holy abode. So, chapter 1, verse 2. Judgment on the house of God, right? There's at least 2 or 3 different verses, and those are on one of my charts about judgment on the house of God. That's where it starts. For look, the Lord comes from his home, descends and proceeds on the heights of the earth. Beneath him the hills are dissolved. Plains are like wax before fire, as water poured down from a steep. Well, okay, but it's heat being poured down, not water. All this is for Jacob's revolt. So think Jews against Christ, Israel, all of this, all of it. It's all this judgment, which is about his holy abode, house of God. That's verse 5. And Israel's house, what is Jacob's sin? And then it mentions Shomer and Jerusalem, so it's and Judah's revolt, Jerusalem. So, okay. So what does he do? This is talking about Christ. So I make Shomer a field full of ruins. So this is Christ judging his people. House of God. Okay. So yeah, pastors don't want to really get into this end time stuff like this because what is it really? It's all about judgment, and it doesn't say here, but first, there's no prophecy that says, first I'm going to take my people, the best of my people, the ones that believe in Christ, and they're going to be brought up to heaven. That doesn't say that. None of these prophecies say that. That's something the pastors made up. They take a few verses out of the New Testament and say, it means this. They ignore all the prophecies. So all these prophecies don't apply. What we say applies. All right, well, why quote Micah 6:15? A prophecy is never going to come true. All right, or you can say, okay, well, this was about a long time ago, right? This has already been happening. It's already done. Blah, blah, blah. All right, well, let's read on then. All right, so you read on. Talks about Jacob, Israel, read on. Alright, get to the end of chapter 2. Verse 12, I will gather the whole of you, Jacob, will join Israel's fragments into one. So there's the remnant. All the remnant, right? I will collect as a sheep is in Basra. Alright. The opener shall go up before them. It's talking about Christ. Unloose, and they pass through the gate. Remember the bullocks coming out of the stall, so unloose the bullocks and they'll pass through the gate of the stall, right? Same context. They shall pass with their leader before them and the Lord at their head. Okay, same thing I pointed out, Hosea 1, 9, and 10, Ezekiel 37, all these same prophecies about all 12 tribes coming together at the end time. Chapter 3, I cry, listen now, chiefs of Jacob and you rulers of Israel's house of Israel, house of Jacob, all 12 tribes. Why have you no knowledge or judgment, hating the good but in love with the bad? Remember, they hated me without a cause. Same idea. You tear their skin from them and flesh from their bones. That's war. You devour the flesh of my people in war. Alright, well, actually we mentioned that once before because we were here. Let's look at our other chart. Go over to Micah. Actually, I already read this, so let's see where we read it before. We read it before in Matthew 2:6. Remember, because I covered this when we were up in Matthew 2:6. So let's go back. See? Go back to Matthew 2:6. What is 2:6? Christ to come from Bethlehem, 12 tribes redeemed by Christ in the end time. So we know this context. And 5. Okay, we're still in chapter 3, verse 5. Thus says the Lord to the preachers who swindle my people by gnashing their teeth. Remember the gnashing of teeth? Yeah. That's one of the last things mentioned in Revelation. Yeah. If you're wicked, just continue to be wicked. If you're righteous, continue to be righteous. Right? They won't enter his kingdom. Right? Alright, he talks about the ones who shall have night, darkness, sun will go down on such prophets. Okay, well, who are the prophets the sun's going down on? The leaders of your synagogues, which are really just assemblies. In other words, wherever the house of God is. And where is the house of God? Well, today it's in churches. Alright. Blackness spread over their day. Yeah, because they don't have the word and they don't want it. Don't take it to a church because they'll reject it. Judgment and strength to tell Jacob his sin. Verse 8, and to Israel tell of his crimes. So, chiefs of Jacob's house, listen to this. And to the guides who hate justice in Israel's home. Yes, well, they'd have to hate justice if you're not creating a proper justice system the way he told you 1,000 times in scriptures, to follow his law and set up a proper justice system, elect the most godly leaders. Well, if your churches are not doing that, that means they hate justice. Otherwise, they'd just be doing what it said. Or you got to say, well, these pastors don't know anything. Well, whatever. Why pay them, go to their church and pay them money and give them money to do all these great things if they don't know what they're doing? All right? It's up to you. Straighten it out. If you're going to go to the church, then you need to speak up for what's right. Who build Zion with blood and Jerusalem vice. Yeah. The holy people. Whose judges decree for a bribe. That's why the church was supposed to elect the most godly leaders. Right? When those leaders could only come from a church. They can only be those statesmen raised up in churches with full knowledge of his law. Why that you should follow his law, because that's how you keep your nation on the right track. Instead of having perpetual war, you have perpetual blessings, right? Whose priests only teach for their pay, whose prophets for money divine. Yeah, they write books, they make their money selling their wisdom, but in reality, they don't have much of a message if they can't even, do just the basics. Follow his law, have a justice system based on his law. That's the basic. That's 101. Very beginning. You got to do that first, and then you can go to these other things, right? But if you forget that, then it's got to come back and judge you. Get to chapter 4. But it shall be at the end of the times. The hill of the house of the Lord, think New Jerusalem, shall be fixed as the chief of the hills. Yes, exactly. Higher shall be than the heights, and to it all people shall flow. That's New Jerusalem. Let's go to the hill of the Lord, to the temple where Jacob's God dwells. And where does he dwell at the end time? New Jerusalem. From Zion the law shall proceed, and the Lord will speak from Jerusalem, govern many peoples, decree to fierce nations. What? No more war. Do we still have war? Okay. Well, then this is later on. This is not something, In other words, if this is a time we're speaking of where there's no more war, Christ is in control, all 12 tribes are back together under Christ, which you just read, there's no more war, this is end time. Then each shall rest under his vine, under his fig without fear, yea, family trees, no more war, no one fighting each other, as the mouth of the Lord has decreed. For then all peoples will walk, each one in the power of its God. So is each one of the 12 tribes walking in the power of its God, and no more war. And we should also walk in the power of the Lord forever and ever. Okay, I think that's very specific. No more war forever. That's what he's going to do. And a proper justice system based on his law. At that time, verse 6, I will gather the maimed, cherish the mourn, make the disabled a princedom, and the banished a powerful nation. He's talking about his people who are now redeemed. And the Lord reign with them on Mount Zion from then and forever. Again, hasn't happened. Then you get down to verse 14 about striking Christ on the rod with a cheek. Then you get to verse 5, which goes to Matthew 2:6, which is Christ. So he fixes a time for the birth of her child, and he will restore the children of Israel, the rest of his brothers. So, talking about the children of Israel plus the rest of his brothers, the house of Israel, he sent the house of Judah too. So all 12 tribes being brought back together. Hebrews 8:8 and the others. Jeremiah chapter 30, 31, 32, 33, Ezekiel 37, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Then he gets down to the 7 shepherds. That's chapter 5, verse 4. Okay? Been through all that. Fragments of Jacob shall be in great nations. Verse 6. Fragments of Jacob shall be like to the heathen in the midst of great people, a lion with cows and forest. Okay? But at that time, I will cut off your chariot drivers. In other words, think about the military-industrial complex, right? Cut off your witchcrafts. In other words, he'll teach you God's law. God's law will be written in your breast, exactly what Hebrews 8:8 says. And that's the 12 tribes. All this context is the 12 tribes. No globalists. Okay. Going down, chapter 6, for Jehovah will plead with his people. Again, 12 tribes, no other people. And with Israel he will discuss. My people, what did I do with you? In other words, I gave you all these great things, told you what to do, told you to follow my law, you didn't do it. Instead, you went out, made money, and did your own thing. All right, chapter 6, you get down to verse 8. About administering justice, proper justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God, right? Okay. And after that, talking about the people full of oppression, falsified scale, that's banking. 13, I've inflicted disease on the house of God, right? Okay. His people. And what do? They walked in plans they contrived, verse 16. So that's Babylon the Great in Revelation. This is a time where all this war comes to an end, right? So that's the context. Now, if you just continue on, chapter 7. Look out for the day when your punishment comes, verse 4. Okay. Foes of a man are the men of his house. Where did we read that before? From my darkness the Lord turns to light. Verse 8, I will fear the correction of God. Okay. Those are the remnant. Which you already mentioned. Where is Jehovah your God? To you that will come on that day. Verse 14. Or excuse me, that's 11. Result of the crimes. So the land has been wasted to people, the result of their crimes. Verse 13. God, your race by my staff, the flock you possess. That's the remnant of the 12 tribes, of course. No other context. Go on down. Chapter 7. What God would forgive a sin like you? That's 18. Pardon faults that have broke his estate. Okay, well, he had to judge you, so all of his land was torn up when he brought these other. Of course, he empowered them to destroy you. Same thing he always does. Not retaining his anger forever, for he feels it a delight to be kind. In other words, a delight to give mercy to the 12 tribes. He returns and has mercy on us. 19. Us, the 12 tribes. That's the context. Cast all our faults to the depths of the sea, giving truly to Jacob the promise to Abraham. The promise is a mercy to the 12 tribes, his posterity, his offspring. That's where it started, Genesis 15. As he swore to our fathers, in all the context we see in the New Testament about them expecting the resurrection. There it is, right there, the end of Micah. That's the resurrection of the 12 tribes, what they were expecting. That's why it quoted Micah. Of course, they knew Micah. They knew the resurrection. So, the context are the ones who are doing all this perpetual war, the Jews against Christ, who think they don't need any of that. They just depend on their millions and billions and trillions or whatever they got, right? But the Jews for Christ, the few people, the farmers and the low-born, he empowers them to understand his word and to teach it to others. And, the word's there, it's available. All you gotta do is look at it and read it and comprehend it and think, well, maybe my money ain't gonna save me. John 6:31. But a lot of them won't. 6:31. He gave them bread to eat from out of heaven. Now we read that one before. Christ is the bread of life, which promises redemption for the Jews for Christ. Okay, so we read about the manna, but it wasn't this verse. It wasn't Psalms 78:24. It was another one about manna. So this is, our forefathers ate the manna in the desert, as it's written, but it was a different quote. This one's Psalms, the other one was, I don't know, it was Exodus probably. I tell you, surely, okay, we're in John now, 32. Moses did not himself give you that bread, but my Father will give you the real bread, when the bread of God is he who descends from heaven. So the bread of God then is Christ and his word, in the way that he sustains you by shielding you from harm and all that. So of course they were expecting this. Gives life to the world, that's the resurrection. But it's not globalists. We already read the world he's talking about is these people of his people who are spread to the four corners of the world, right? Give us, sir, this bread always. Jesus answered, I am the bread of life. The one who comes to me, in other words, believes on Christ, teaches the context of Christ correctly, doesn't lie to people for just so get them in the doors to keep the church going. One who believes on me will never thirst. Everyone whom the Father gives to me will come to me. Yes, in another place it says they're dragged. He drags them. Alright. So I descended not to carry out my own intention, but the intention of my sender, which is his Father. And this is the intention, that all which he has entrusted to me, I shall lose nothing, but restore it at the last day, resurrection of the 12 tribes. Everyone who sees the Son and confides in him should possess eternal life, and I'll restore him at the last day. Of course, they say, oh, this isn't Jews. Wow. He says he's the bread. Isn't this guy Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we knew or know? How can he then say I came down from heaven? Okay, well they don't comprehend that. That's what happened. No one is able to come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. Verse 44. And I will restore him at the last day, is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. That's the next quote. Alright. So let's look at Psalm 78:24, see what we got there. '78. Rained on them manna for food. Okay. And who did he rain on? Well, if you back up to the beginning of 78, my people attend to my law. In other words, follow my law. Another one of the 1,000 times he just tells his people, just follow my law. That's what I gave it to you for. You know, he said, Ephraim, I gave him laws, but he looked at them like they were strange. Right? Okay. So yeah, who can read that and then think this doesn't apply to the 12 tribes? Of course it does. When in Jacob he set up the witness, and in Israel settled the law. The witness, I would say, would be Jacob's pillar stone and the rod of Aaron. And Israel settled the law. I didn't say the whole world, he gave the law to the whole world. He gave it to Israel. They were the ones who administer his law. That's what their job was, which he had commanded our fathers to teach to the people, their sons, so they taught the next generation. Think posterity. So your posterity of Israel was supposed to teach the law, follow the law, and have a justice system based on the law from generation to generation. So if you're part of those people, you see why they invented this word Gentiles and then try to say, well, you're not part of these people. Because if you were a part of these people, then logically Christian people would look at this and say, well, wait a minute, we're supposed to be teaching our sons and daughters, our posterity from generation to generation to follow his law and have a justice system based on his law. But if someone says, well, no, you're just Gentiles, you're a heathen, you don't have anything to do with Israel, you can claim Christ or whatever, but see? So they're destroying your heritage. Once you realize, okay, well, these Israel people have always known the message of Christ, have always been Christian. Of course, they called him Melchizedek. So what? Still Christ, same person we call Christ. They've always been expecting resurrection. We expect resurrection. Well, why would you expect resurrection if resurrection's only for the 12 tribes, except that they lie to you and say, well, now all these prophecies don't actually apply anymore to these people. The whole Bible, even though we quoted all these prophecies in the New Testament, everything we quote in the New Testament is prophecy to the 12 tribes, it still is not going to happen to the 12 tribes. Or if it does, we don't know where they are, right? We don't know who they are, who these Christian people are. Ephraim and Manasseh, this great empire, great nation and commonwealth, which was called an empires. And of course, they're Christian empires. Oh, and this stuff that happens at the end time applies to these Christian empires, but we don't know who they are, right? So, you just got some people stuck in, change the wording a little bit, but, you can just go back and comprehend it to connect the dots. For they were not, as their fathers, a stubborn and mutinous race, a race that would not fix its heart, whose spirit who was not true to God. That's Psalm 78:8. Like Ephraim's sons, all right, talking about 12 tribes in Egypt's land. That's where the 12 tribes came from. How he cleft the sea, so they passed over. That's them coming out of Egypt. So we know. Split in the desert, the rocks. Okay, think about the rock of Oreb and others. Quench their thirst. Okay, well, we read that. Christ the rock. Struck the rock. Water came out. That's the rock of Oreb. Okay, and then he talks about raining on manna on them for food. So, 78. Kindled in Jacob a fire and anger on Israel came. Verse 21. That's when they said, how can he give us bread or make here for his people a feast, and that's where they were talking about the quail, and the quail, he blew in all this quail, and then while they were eating it, they got judged, and the judgment was he burnt a bunch of them, apparently. Alright, well, they got a few judgments. So they had no faith in their God, nor placed in his trust in his salvation. Really. So they're in the desert. He's giving them water, but obviously they think that he's just going to give them everything. As soon as they come out of Egypt, they're just going to be given everything. And, he's going to send some plane over, some helicopters over, pick them up, take them to the promised land, and then just run the people out of the promised land for them and just set them down and let them go into the home and possess it and do whatever they want. No, that's not how he works. So, but still, he had a plan, and he's carrying it out. Verse 31, slew their mightiest captains, crippled Israel's youths. Yeah, okay. Well, that's judgment on the house of God at that point in time, even though they, just didn't believe in his salvation, all these kinds of things, right? And that says, for all this, they sin more. Verse 32, believe not in his powers. And it says, our God who was redeemed. Yeah, read it. It's all about 12 tribes. Can't be any other context. But it still says they're going to get Christ the rock. And all right. When you get down to, Jesus, long chapter. Get down to 66, 67. Gave them perpetual shame. but abandoned his dwelling with Joseph, chose not the tribe of Ephraim, but it was Judah's tribe he selected or chose. And he built a great temple. Okay. Chose David. Take care of his flock. Okay. Well, there you go. Christ is the bread of life, which promises redemption for the Jews for Christ. So, yeah, took the ones out of the book of life who built the golden calf and who kept rejecting him out in the desert. You already mentioned that. Kept the remnant, the few that did want the salvation and redemption. Worked with them. The ones that God drew to Christ or drug or whatever. Yeah. All right, let's look at 645, which we had left off at. All right, talking about the ones who the Father would draw or whatever. He will restore them at the last day, as it's written. So who's getting restored at the last day? The whole world? Or these in Isaiah 54:13. Well, let's go look at Isaiah 54:13 and see who these people are that's getting restored in the last day. This must be Gentiles, non-Israelite people. Right? Who else could it be? Uh-oh. Down at the end of 54, there's the standard, which is mentioned multiple times all throughout Isaiah. All right, well, but everybody remembers Isaiah 53, right? Because we've been to Isaiah 53 multiple times. When you go back to 53, well, that starts with 52. 52 puts 53 in the context. You go back to 52. What's the context in 53? Well, for my race went into Egypt. Okay, 12 tribes. My people, they seize for no debt, yet my race shall acknowledge my power on the day when I come and exclaim, here I am, 52:6. That's when Christ returns at the end time. Okay, and you just continue up, talks about Jerusalem, his people, redeems Jerusalem, verse 9. So, yeah, that's 12 tribes, right? Israel's God will shield your rear, 12. Okay, then you get up to, oh yeah, well, here they are being selected out from men. When everyone will wonder about you, the end of 52. Cleanse the nations, or kings will be silent. Who will believe our report? Over whom is the Lord's arm revealed? For he grew before them a weak shoot like a plant from the ground. Yeah, this is the remnant, unadorned and without honor, but they respected Christ and held to that belief till the day they died, right? All right, then it's talking about Christ who carried his griefs, bore our sorrows. Lord punished him for the faults of us all, right? Didn't open his mouth, who seized against justice and right. So, in other words, he told them to have a proper justice system, but they perverted that and killed him. Didn't have any reason to kill him, but did it anyway. Destroyed by the crime of my race, so destroyed by the 12 tribes. Those are the leaders, right? No crime he had done, no wrong by his mouth. That's 9. Of course, there's multiple quotes. Alright. But, why? He laid his soul with a vow. But yet, he will see, this is Christ, will see his race spreading with time. Verse 10. And that is the whole point of it. So after he dies and his race will spread with time, eventually he'll come back and redeem. In other words, they'll build up. They'll be judged along the way, struck with his rod of correction and all that kind of stuff. But they'll still spread out. He'll keep the best, the ones that are drawn to him. And just read on. Prayed for the wicked. That's how it sums up. So we know what 53 is about then. So what's 54 about? Well, my header starts out Israel's consolation. And this is goes back to Galatians 4:27. And who is this who's never born a child? Well, at the end time, there's just a small remnant, And it says, very little men, so few that a child could count them on their fingers. So that's not many. Very few men sticking with the word to the end. No, they're going out and buying AR-15s and bullets and all this kind of thing because they think that somehow that's going to save them. And they're buying stoves and this and that and the other. Well, yeah, you should be prepared. I don't have a problem with that. And you should be able to protect your family. You know, sure. But it's Christ, the shield. That's the number one thing you should be thinking about learning, is who Christ the shield is. Because you can have all the guns and all the ammo you want. It only takes one bullet to kill you. And you can just be walking out and somebody shoots you, and before you even hear the bullet, you're already dead. So all that really doesn't do you much good unless you have Christ the shield, protecting you. So if you are out and about, you have to get water or whatever it is, you got to have Christ the shield deflect those bullets with his angels constantly on you all the time. Just having the gun doesn't really do you a whole lot of good. You see? Yeah, I think we should have guns and protect yourself, sure. But that's not what the point is. The point is Christ the standard, which is here in 54, which is why, see, the Jews for Christ are perfected into a standard by understanding the context of his word and who Christ the shield, Christ the rock, and Christ who's the Spirit of God, his word. He's the book of life and all these things, the water of life. We got to understand these contexts. So the few men that get into this and try to put all this together in their mind, because you got to be able to teach your offspring, like it just said, your posterity. So the few of you that are going to be given posterity, the reason you would be given posterity is because you know these things and you can actually teach it to your posterity. If you can't teach them the truth and how to follow God's law and how to have a righteous justice system, what does he need you for? What's he going to use you for? Why give you a posterity, a family tree? Right? First of all, you got to understand all this stuff. You got to start here. This is the basics. Understanding what Christ taught from Moses, and then you can go to the prophets. And then eventually you can read Psalms. Alright, the standard. Just look at my chart on Isaiah, and I've got it highlighted in pink about the standard. The whole concept of the standard is that these few Jews for Christ that actually learn this, do the right things, put this into operation the best that they can, try to work together in just communities who are following his law. Hey, Abraham didn't have a big community, but you notice when he went out to rescue Lot, he had 316 or 18 men that could fight. Well, okay, but these men obviously probably had, a lot of them had wives or maybe a child, or they had, a father or mother or relative who might have been with them. Well, if you got 316 or 18 fighting men, then you got about 1,000 people in your household. Maybe more, but let's say 1,000. That's a lot of people, considering that Abraham didn't have any children then. So Abraham didn't have anybody. But he had 1,000 people in his household. And he trained them to fight. Why? Because he was training them in God's law and to maintain a justice system which takes men that can, affect the justice. You got to take out justice on somebody. It doesn't just happen. Yeah, you got to be able to fight for it. So he trained them how to do it. Right. Same thing we got today. We got sheriffs and we got this and that, and police and blah, 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 military. Okay, somebody's got to do that. Somebody's got to put all that together. Well, who did it? Abraham did. God, why? Because he was already told that by Christ what to do, how to follow his law, and he did it. All right. So, and he was just one guy. One guy. Had 1,000 people in his household. That's what you're going to have at the end time. All right. You're going to have the one guy who's the standard. And he's going to be teaching these other people what to do. And hopefully some of them are going to be listening now because their country's destroyed. And there's just a remnant left There's few men, very few men that understand this. That's why I'm putting it on video. So you can download the videos, get them off of YouTube, and keep them. Alright. 54:13. Well, I never got up to 13, but of course, he talks about these stones, the marbles, sapphires, rubies, crystals, all that. That all goes up to Revelation 21:19. Okay. So we know that applies to the 12 tribes. It all has to do with New Jerusalem. And Lord, teach your sons and well prosper your children. Be steadfast and right. In other words, righteous justice system. Keep far from oppression. That's to do it. To it and corruption you must never look. No bribes. So proper justice system. You must not bring them near you. See, gathering, they gather against you. Who gather against you, by you they will fall. Okay. Alright, so whoever gathered against Abraham would fall by these men that he trained. Plus he's got Christ, the shield, helping him. So it's not just you. It's not just the men you trained. Okay. It's not just your household. It's not just the people. You don't trust in your army. That's not the whole point. Yes, you have those things, but you trust in Christ to make it all work. And you do what Christ said. You follow His law. If you have to judge somebody, you have to do it. That's all there is to it. That's what He told you to do. Made the smith to blow fire with his bellows, by his skill to work out every vessel for use. Alright, well, it's kind of like the idea of the potter over the clay, in other words. I also created the waster to spoil, so that's Satan. So, okay, potter over the clay, Romans 9:22-23. The waster to spoil, but all tools formed against you shall never succeed. As remnant, you shall conquer all tongues that rise up in contention. Your Lord's servants have this right from me. Yes, yes, this remnant he taught this word to, and they are doing it, doing the right thing, maintaining the proper justice system. This royal priesthood, kings and priests, have the right, and that's why he called them gods, because he gave them rights. And this concept of rights from God is the idea of unalienable or inalienable rights, which we embodied into our Constitution. Someday we're going to have to all get into that. So you can see this was the founding of our country, and this is the basics, the rights. But they only gave those rights to themselves and their posterity, as it says right there in the preamble. Just read it again. Who did they give the rights to? Well, themselves and their posterity. We all know who that was. They weren't talking to the world. They weren't saying, oh, well, just anybody, we'll just bring them into our country, make them a citizen, and give them rights, and give them a place to live, and we'll all pay for it. That wasn't the concept. So your government is doing that, is following some other law contrary to what your fathers created. They're working against your country, not what your fathers wanted. Alright, so when you get to 55, then do you still continue? Yes, still continue with the 12 tribes context. I will record a firm contract with you, the strong and true promise of David. Verse 3, of course, that goes to Acts 13. I give him a witness to nations, prince and a lawgiver to peoples. You should call a nation you know not. To you pagans who knew not will run because of your ever-living God, and Israel's holy who honors. So, Israel's holy, the God, Christ, is honoring who? Well, what was the promise to David? It wasn't to the world. Okay. Alright. That's 12 tribes being honored. Goes to Acts 13. Oh, in Acts 13, and then where it says Gentiles, yes, but you read Gentiles, and what does it say? Old context, I went over that. Yeah. It's all about Israel people, 12 tribes, predestinated, blah, blah, blah. The people I foreknew, and all this kind of thing, which all of those contexts that it talks about in Acts 13 only apply to the 12 tribes. So it's not a worldly, not globalists. And again, this beacon at the end of 55, that's the standard again. The trees of the field clapping their hands. That's your posterity, your family tree, right? Okay. And they're the beacon at New Jerusalem, all right? And what does it say? 56. Thus the ever-living says, keep to justice, practice right. Justice system based on God's law. Wow. What does it say? For my victory is approaching. Okay, victor's over the beast. Revelation 15. My righteousness is near. So we're getting right near the end time. That's what we're saying here. And of course, when you get to the end of Isaiah, that's when you wrap up what's in Revelation. So that's the whole point. That's the context. The son of Adam, firm in it. Verse 2. 56:2. Who keeps the Sabbath without breach. Who understands the Sabbath. And his hand from doing wrong. In other words, he follows God's law. Let not the convert say, the Lord cuts from his race, or the eunuch cry, I am a withered tree. People is trees, in other words, family trees. For thus says the ever-living, if they keep their Sabbath, I give them in my home walls more fair, listing name, which will not be destroyed. Yes, well, all that's in Revelation. And what does it do? When you get down to verse 8, when lost Israel I collect. Okay, isn't that the house of Israel? He told the house of Judah to go to, tell them about this word. Well, they were supposed to teach these prophecies because these prophecies are quoted. If he told them to go, Paul, to go to these lost sheep of the house of Israel, all right, well, that's, who is this? Well, it keeps saying it's the 12 tribes. It's Israel people. People that keep the Sabbath, blah, 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 yeah. Alright. I could teach the whole thing, but I'm not sure what else good I could do here. Alright, let's go look at, alright, well, we're almost done anyway on this one. So let's look at Galatians 4:27. That was the cross-reference back to some of the things Paul said. Galatians, I can't find Galatians, so there it is. 4:27. For it is written, let the barren who's not given birth to children rejoice, shriek and shout, she who has not labored. In other words, virgins who have never had children because they didn't have men to marry. That's what I said. That was back, you notice, what was it, Isaiah chapter 2. I was trying to point that out. Yeah. Oh, maybe that wasn't it. Chapter 4. First of chapter 4. About your men fall by the sword, and you're mighty in the war. I think Revelation 11:7. Her gates lament and mourn. She sits lonely on the ground. So your country's destroyed. Women left. Don't have men to marry. Okay. Judgment on the house of God. 7 women then will seize a single man and cry, we will eat of our bread, clothe in our dress, only give your name to us to take off our reproach. Yeah, because there aren't but just this small remnant of men left. Otherwise, you're not going to find 7 women are all going to decide to marry one man all of a sudden. It's because if they don't, they're not going to have children. First of all, they've got to understand the concept that they can't just go out and marry whoever, because that's not what the law they were given. So now they learn that, oh, these are women, number one, that have to understand God's law, that they can't violate that and be blessed. But they can be blessed if 7 marry the same man, a man of God that understands all this, or one of these men of this remnant who are out, as Abraham did, teaching the proper truth of God's Word. The few that are left that can do that, well, then they understand they can't just marry anybody. They can't go down to, South America or go over here to this country. They can't go over there to that country and just marry whoever. Even if they wanted to, they can't be blessed doing that, so they understand. But they can marry one man. A violation of that, Jacob had multiple wives, as did David and many others. Alright, so he quotes this 54. Because the children of the deserted are more than hers who had the husband. Yeah, in other words, those who had children before. So these virgins who have all 7 women who marry one man are actually going to have more offspring, and that's another prophecy. It's referring to another prophecy about them being redeemed, the remnant being redeemed at the end time, and having twice as many children than what they had before. When these others return, in other words, the ones that went out to captivity, once they're brought back, they're going to see all of these kids. They're going to be like, where'd all these come from? They thought the country was destroyed. But see, he kept a remnant behind, just like it says in chapter 12 of Revelation. The woman went to the desert, right? Well, I know people think desert, but no, that's an allegory or a metaphor and that kind of thing. It doesn't mean that they went somewhere. They didn't go to Saudi Arabia, right? No, they were protected by Christ, the shield, and well, just compare it to other prophecies. That's the whole idea. But if you keep on reading there in Galatians, and we, brethren, are children according to the promise through Isaac. Okay, the children according to the promise through Isaac are 12 tribes. It's not a globalist interpretation. Then as he who was born naturally despised him who was by the Spirit, so as Esau who despised Jacob. What says the Scripture? Send away the slave with her son. Alright, or Ishmael, yeah. Either way. Ishmael there. Do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Galatians chapter 5 at the beginning. Okay. Yes, so it talks about all that and gives you the context. You back up 24 and so forth. But when you're in Galatians, if you notice, you went back to the end of chapter 3 in Galatians, but if you are of Christ, then you are of Abraham's race, inheritors by the promise. Alright, well the promise was the 12 tribes, promise of Abraham to redeem them, and they were the inheritors. So the ones that believe Christ are the inheritors. I'm not saying the whole world's going to inherit, just like, you don't inherit someone else's estate. You don't say, oh, okay, now I'm a part of your family all of a sudden. So I'm just going to inherit with you because I believe some of what was promised to you I want, and I believe in it, so I'm going to get it. No, that's what pastors teach. That's not the context. Sounds viable when you're reading it because of the wording, but if you just put it in context, no. Oh, that's just something that you're told. So, that was 21. If we go back, I guess where we started was over here. We were on 20, so that was 21. And we're going to leave off at Isaiah 54. We're going to come back with John 7:38. Jesus for Christ given living waters. That's the Spirit of Christ at the end time. And then we're going to look at the cross reference to Acts, Revelation, water of life is where it's mentioned there. So we're going to come back with video 22. So thanks for watching.